Welcome to your deep dive. We're diving into the world of meaning in discourse analysis. You're clearly interested in how we make meaning, like beyond just the words, and trust me, it can get super complex.
It really can. You've given me some really fascinating sources here from the Discourse Analyzer AI toolkit. It covers everything from implied meaning to how power dynamics shape our understanding.
Okay, cool. One of the first things that stood out to me was this idea of meaning beyond the dictionary. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. Words can mean different things depending on the context, but how far can we really stretch a word's meaning?
Further than you'd think. And that's where pragmatics comes in. Pragmatics helps us understand how things like the situation we're in, our culture, even historical events, they shape meaning in a way a dictionary just can't.
Can you give me an example? Like, how can something like history change how we interpret a message?
Well, consider the phrase, drain the swamp. On the surface, it seems simple, like a call for reform, right? But given its history, especially in American politics, it carries a lot more weight. It brings up populism, distrust of institutions, even revolution. So, depending on your knowledge of that history, that phrase can really hit people differently.
Wow, that's fascinating. So those phrases have become cultural shorthand. They carry all these extra layers of meaning. So we've got the words and we've got the context. What else do we need to think about when we're analyzing meaning in discourse?
Well, your sources also point to nonverbal communication. It plays a huge role in making meaning, and we're often not even aware of the signals we send and receive.
Right, like someone could say all the right things,
Hmm.
but if their body language is like, I don't care, we're going to pick up on that.
Exactly. It's not just body language either. Tone of voice is huge. You could say that's fine in 100 ways, and each one would have a totally different meaning.
Oh, totally. It's wild how much we say without even opening our mouths. But then how do we analyze those nonverbal cues? It seems so subjective.
That's where discourse analysis comes in. It gives us this framework to break down these complex interactions and to understand all the different ways meaning gets made, even beyond just words.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got words, context, nonverbal signals. Is there anything we're missing?
We can't forget that we don't figure out meaning alone. Your sources emphasize interactional meaning. So the meaning that gets created between people during a conversation.
So it's not just me trying to figure out what you mean and you trying to figure out me. It's us, like building that meaning together back and forth.
Exactly. Imagine a business meeting, right? And someone says, we need to increase productivity. Sounds simple, but it could mean tons of things. It depends on the company culture, individual goals, so many factors. And it's through the conversation, the questions, even disagreements, that the real meaning of productivity emerges. Such a good point. Makes you realize how much we assume in everyday conversations. Like we think we're on the same page, but maybe we're reading completely different books, metaphorically speaking.
And that actually leads to another cool idea from the articles. Words as cultural chameleons. Meaning isn't fixed, It shifts with our background and shared understanding.
And cultural chameleons, huh? Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more about how culture shapes meaning in ways we might not even notice.
Well, your sources talk about indexicality. It's the idea that words like this, that, here, there, they only make sense if we share a specific context. They're like these pointers to an understanding that's not directly said.
So if I said, you wouldn't believe what happened here yesterday, you'd only get it if you know which here I was talking about, right?
Exactly. And that's just a small example. Think about humor. What's funny in one culture could be offensive in another. We're constantly navigating these nuances, often without realizing it. Whoa, that's pretty wild when you think about it. We assume words have fixed meanings, but they're actually changing based on who's talking, who's listening, and their whole cultural background.
And it gets even trickier when we bring in power dynamics. The sources point out that the language we use isn't neutral, it reflects and strengthens power structures.
So it's not just about different interpretations, it's about whose interpretation gets to be considered valid. That's kind of unsettling, isn't it?
It is. Think about the term economic freedom. For some, that means opportunity, entrepreneurship, but for others, it highlights inequality, where wealth and power are in the hands of a few. How we define and use these terms is totally tied to our beliefs about society.
It's like language is this battleground where different ideologies are fighting it out.
You could say that. And with discourse analysis, we can start to see who's using language as a weapon and how they're shaping our understanding of the world.
This is feeling like a real deep dive now. We went from the dictionary to power dynamics so fast.
And we're just getting started. In the next part, we'll explore specific types of meaning, like implied meaning and conversational meaning, and we'll see how they work in real conversations.
I'm ready to dive deeper. This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about communication.
Welcome back to your deep dive into meaning and discourse analysis.
I'm ready for more. Last time we talked about context, nonverbal cues, even power dynamics, shaping meaning. But the sources also mention these different types of meaning, like implied meaning. What exactly is that?
Well, implied meaning, or implicature as the fancy folks call it, is all about what's hinted at, not directly said, like reading between the lines. Remember when we talked about drain the swamp? That's a perfect example of implied meaning in politics.
Right, because it's not really about cleaning up swamps. It's about all those cultural and historical associations. It's sending a message that goes way beyond the words themselves.
Exactly. And to understand implicature, we got to talk about Grace's cooperative principle. It basically says that when we talk, we assume people are trying to cooperate, be informative, like they're being relevant, truthful, clear.
Yeah, that makes sense. Conversations would be chaos if we couldn't assume people were, like, trying to work with us.
Right. But it's when those expectations get broken, on purpose or not, that we start to pick up on those implied meanings. Like if I ask, do you have the time? I'm not literally asking if you possess time, right? I'm asking for the time.
Oh, okay. So we're constantly filling in the gaps, using our knowledge of social norms and stuff to understand what's meant, even if it's not actually said out loud.
Precisely. And that's why understanding implicature is so important in discourse analysis. It helps us peel back those layers and see how meaning is built through hints, suggestions, even being deliberately vague.
Wow, it makes you realize how much we're reading between the lines every time we talk. But doesn't that make misunderstandings more likely? What if we read the wrong message?
Absolutely. Implicature depends a lot on shared understanding and cultural context. Something that's a clear implied meaning in one culture could be totally misinterpreted in another. And of course, people can use implied meaning to mislead or be manipulative.
Yeah, seems like a powerful tool that could also be used for, well, not so good things.
Exactly. That's why being aware of these subtle mechanisms is so important. Discourse analysis gives us the tools to look at those layers of meaning critically and ask ourselves, what's really being said here and what's being left out?
Okay, that makes sense. So you've got implied meaning. The sources also talked about conversational meaning. Is that the same as interactional meaning, or is it different?
They're definitely related, but there's a nuance. Interactional meaning is about co-creating meaning together, right? But conversational meaning focuses on that dynamic process of meaning making that happens during the conversation.
So it's less about the final shared understanding and more about the back and forth, the negotiation, the way meaning changes as we keep talking.
Exactly. Think about a negotiation, right? Each offer, counteroffer, everything contributes to the overall meaning of that negotiation. Or even just how we tell stories, the listener's reactions, their questions, their body language. It all influences how we shape the story.
That's true. Like, I'd tell the same story totally differently to my friends versus my grandma. You know, I'd adjust my language, my tone, everything based on who I'm talking to and how they're responding.
Exactly. And that's why analyzing conversations is so valuable. It shows us how meaning gets built in real time, how we deal with misunderstandings, and how we use language to achieve our goals, whether that's persuading someone, negotiating, or just building a connection.
This is all starting to click. It's not just about understanding individual words, it's about the whole flow of the conversation and how meaning emerges from that.
It's like a dance, really, a constant give and take.
Okay, so implied meaning, conversational meaning. Any other types of meaning we should know about?
Actually, yeah, the sources touch on a bunch more. Social and cultural meaning, ideological meaning, even intertextual meaning, which is how different texts like reference and build on each other.
Wow, there's so much to meaning.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with social and cultural meaning. How does our background shape how we use and understand language?
Think of it like a cultural lens we use to see the world. Our shared norms, values, experiences, they all affect how we understand certain words, phrases, even whole conversations.
So even if we speak the same language, we might be speaking different cultural dialects in a way.
Exactly. The word respect, for example, might have really different meanings in a hierarchical versus a more egalitarian culture. Or think about humor. What's funny to one group could be offensive or just confusing to another.
Yeah, I can see how that could cause some serious communication problems, especially in today's world where we're always interacting with people from different backgrounds.
You got it. Understanding these social and cultural parts of meaning is crucial for communication and bridging those cultural gaps.
Okay, so we've got social and cultural meaning. What about ideological meaning? That sounds kind of intense.
It can be. Ideological meaning is about how language reflects and reinforces certain beliefs, values, even power structures. It's about understanding how language can be used to persuade, manipulate, or even control how we think about things.
So like using language to push an agenda or a specific worldview, kind of like propaganda.
That's part of it, yeah. Think about political campaigns and how they use slogans to make people feel certain ways, or how advertising uses language to make us want things we don't need.
Wow, it's like language is this powerful weapon that can be used for good or bad.
It's a powerful tool for sure. That's why critical thinking and media literacy are so important. We need to be able to break down the language we see and hear, whether it's news, speeches, or even just everyday conversations, and ask, whose interests are being served here? What assumptions are being made? How is this affecting my understanding?
You're making me rethink how I process all the information I take in. So we've got social, cultural, ideological meaning. And what was that last one? Intertextual something.
Intertextual meaning. It's basically how different texts talk to each other, Like one might quote, allude to, or even make fun of another.
Like when a TV show references a movie and you're like, uh-huh, I get it.
Exactly. But it can be way more subtle than that. It could be a news article using historical events to talk about a current issue, or a speech using religious imagery to appeal to a certain group.
So it can be used to create shared understanding, make yourself seem more credible, or even challenge existing narratives. Like you're borrowing the weight of other texts to support your own argument.
You got it. And it's not just about recognizing the references. It's about understanding how those references shape the meaning of what you're reading or hearing.
This is blowing my mind. We've gone from the dictionary to dog whistles to intertextual conversations. It's like discourse analysis gives you superpowers to see the hidden meanings behind everything.
It's about developing that critical awareness of language and how it shapes our world. Recognizing that meaning is never neutral. It's built, negotiated, and fought over within our social and cultural contexts.
This has been such an incredible journey. What can we expect in the final part of our deep dive?
We're going to move from theory to practice. We'll look at real-world examples of how these different types of meaning get created in different situations, from media and politics to education and even online interactions.
I'm so excited. This is seriously making me rethink everything I thought I knew about how we communicate. Welcome back. We're wrapping up our deep dive into meaning and discourse analysis.
It's been a wild ride, exploring how meaning is made, all these hidden layers from context and nonverbal cues to culture and power dynamics. It's fascinating.
For sure. Like, we think we're just using words, but it's so much more complex than that.
Absolutely. And now we're going to see these principles in action, in real life. Let's start with media discourse, It's so powerful in shaping how the public thinks.
Yeah. I've always been curious how the news frames a story using different language.
One great example from your sources is how they talk about immigration. Think about the terms used. Are immigrants, refugees, or illegal aliens? A wave or a community? It makes a huge difference.
Right. The same facts can sound completely different depending on those choices.
Exactly. And by looking at that language, we can spot the ideologies and power dynamics at play. Are we focusing on personal stories or big generalizations about cultures? Is the economic impact a burden or an opportunity?
It's like they're painting a picture with words, and the colors they choose totally change the image.
Precisely. So by understanding these framing techniques, we can be more critical of what we see in the media. We can ask, whose voices are we hearing and whose are missing? What assumptions are being made?
It's like they say, there's no such thing as truly objective media. There's always a perspective shaping the story.
It's not just about spotting bias, though. It's about realizing that all communication involves framing. Choosing some words and perspectives over others is unavoidable.
You've got me thinking about going back and reading all my favorite news sources with a more critical eye. Okay, we've talked media. What about politics?
Oh, political discourse. That's where language is really used strategically to persuade, inspire, and sometimes even mislead.
Right. Politicians are experts at using language to get votes. What are some of the techniques they use to shape meaning?
Well, your sources highlighted metaphors and framing, like how they often talk about economic policies using the language of health. We shoot about the fiscal health of the nation, or policies that stimulate the economy.
So they're making it sound more scientific and objective by, borrowing from medicine.
Exactly. And by talking about health, they're tapping into our values about well-being and security, things like that.
Yeah.
Or think about tax cuts. Are they relief for families or giveaways to the wealthy? Huge difference.
Wow, yeah. Just changing a few words can totally change how we see a policy.
By analyzing those choices, we can see past the fancy rhetoric and ask, who really benefits, whose interests are being served.
It's like discourse analysis gives us a secret decoder ring for political language.
And it's not just politics and media. These principles apply everywhere. Work, relationships, you name it.
So it's really about how we use language to navigate power, connect with people, and express who we are.
Exactly. Think about a teacher using language to create a classroom where everyone feels safe to ask questions, or a therapist helping a client see their experiences in a new light.
Even just chatting with friends or family, we're always shaping meaning.
It's amazing, isn't it? This invisible force of language is all around us, influencing how we think and act.
This deep dive has been incredible. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how meaning works.
That's the power of discourse analysis. It helps us be more aware, more critical, and better communicators.
So what's the biggest takeaway for our listeners? What should they remember about meaning and discourse analysis?
Meaning is never fixed. It's always changing based on how we interact and the power dynamics involved. But by understanding these tools, we can communicate more mindfully, think more critically, and shape the world around us.
I love that. So as you go about your day, pay attention to the language you encounter, ask questions, challenge those assumptions, and remember that every word carries a world of meaning. This has been an awesome deep dive. Thanks for listening.